So this video is going to be more centered for newer players or younger accounts, accounts that have not been playing for the full year, and accounts that may not have any limited sustains to help them through the harder content. If you already have your 2 limited sustainers, I don't think Aventurine is really a necessity for an account like that, as none of the content so far seems to be outscaling our current limited sustainers. Even Luosha is perfectly capable of fulfilling his role as a healer and keeping your team alive. But if you are lacking that limited sustain, or you're seeking out your second limited sustain to add to your account, I do think Aventurine is going to be very beneficial to pull. And we're going to go over that kit now, as well as his light cone, to see if maybe is his light cone going to be a necessity, or does he have other options aside from his preferred light cone. So the unique thing about Aventurine as a preservation unit is that he does seem a lot more offensive oriented compared to our other sustainers. He has a lot of damage built into his kits, a lot of offensiveness built into his kit between his crit damage boost, his crit rate up, his follow-up attacks. So he's going to be one of our first pure bruiser archetype characters. And if we look at his first ascension trace, for every 100 of Aventurine's defense that exceeds a certain value, it increases his own crit rate up to a maximum limit. So I'm expecting this crit rate to be anywhere from like maybe 20 to 40%. I'm not expecting it to be something as massive as, say, like Jing Liu's 50% free crit rate, but I am expecting it to be fairly significant, where you can at the very least forego a crit rate chess piece. And as he does scale off of defense, you're going to want to stack a lot of defense onto him, usually 3,500 to 4,000 defense, to get that potential maximum, allow him to not only be able to protect your team, but also hit hard as well. His second ascension trace has, when the battle starts, it grants all allies a fortified wager shield. That fortified wager shield is the shield from his skill. So it's essentially a free skill at the start of the battle. Everybody starts off with a free meaty shield. And the unique thing about Aventurine's shield is that it can stack on top of each other. So Aventurine's opener is going to be very flexible. You can forgo using his skill as an opener because your team already has a shield, in order to generate an additional skill point, or you can opt to skill with Aventurine on his opener to double stack that shield to get a beefier protection for your team. So he's going to have options on what he can do for his opening move. And then his last trace, and this is going to be the trace that is going to make him the most synergetic with other follow-up attackers. After an ally with fortified wager launches a follow-up attack, so an ally with their shield launches a follow-up attack, Aventurine accumulates 1 blind bet points. This effect can trigger up to a certain number of times. Its trigger count is reset at the start of Aventurine's turn, and then after Aventurine launches his talent's follow-up attack, it provides all allies with a fortified wager that can block a certain amount of damage, and additionally grants a fortified wager that can block a certain amount of damage to the ally with the lowest shield effect, lasting for a certain number of turns. So his final ascension trace is like a goddamn Yu-Gi-Oh card with its effect. So to break it down, we're looking at after an ally with his shield launches a follow-up attack, he accumulates 1 blind bet points. Once he gets a certain number of blind bet points, he launches a follow-up attack. That's part of his talent. When that talent happens, all allies are going to get a shield, an additional shield on top of the shield they already have. In addition, the ally with the lowest shield is going to get another shield. So essentially what this talent does is that all follow-up attackers are going to contribute to Aventurine's own follow-up attack charge. And then Aventurine is going to be able to stack shields multiple times onto your team as well. So they are going to be layered up on shield after shield after shield. You're not going to be taking any damage with Aventurine with this talent. Now his technique is a little interesting. It is basically a gambling technique where you sort of spin this little roulette wheel to get 1 of 3 type of defense boosts, and you can just spam this technique until you get the highest value. And so when you go into battle with this technique, all allies get their defense increase by that corresponding value. So his talent's going to be the bulk of his kit. For any ally with his shield, their effect resistance is going to increase. Additionally, when they are attacked with his shield, he will gain 1 blind bet. Now, this is per ally as well. So if your allies have a shield and they get hit by an AoE, every ally that gets hit is going to give him a blind bet. So 3 allies get hit, that's 3 points of blind bet to go up to his follow-up attack. And then when Aventurine has his shield, he can resist crowd control debuffs, and that effect can trigger again after a certain number of turns. Additionally, Aventurine's going to gain blind bet after getting attacked, and upon reaching a certain number of blind bet points, Aventurine consumes the points to launch multiple hits of follow-up attacks. Each hit is going to deal imaginary damage to a single random enemy, and blind bet has an upper limit. Now, if you recall from playing Aventurine from his story mode, that follow-up attack limit was at 8. So as soon as he acquired 8 blind bet points, he would launch a follow-up attack. And there was an upper limit as well. So if you went past the 8, then you would accumulate extra. There were times where I saw him have, I think, 10 points before he could use his follow-up attacks. So he would use his follow-up attack, and then he would immediately start off with 2 out of 8 from those 2 leftover points. And then, of course, his skill gives his shield, and then you could use this skill multiple times for it to stack up to a certain amount. And then lastly, his ultimate is a damaging move. You're going to get a certain amount of blind bet points, and then you're going to inflict an unnerved debuff onto a single enemy for a certain amount of turns and deal imaginary damage to the target. And then when any ally hits an unnerved enemy target, the ally is going to have their crit damage dealt increased as well. So he does provide that indirect crit damage boost off of his ultimate. So we're going to take a look at his light cone. I am always a little hesitant to recommend light cones for anybody who isn't a whale or a heavy spender, just because of the resources it takes just to get them. But if your account is already starting to look fairly strong, where you have a couple of DPS options, a couple of harmony options, supporter options, and you have your 2 limited sustainers, and you're really just looking to improve what you have right now, I think going for light cones is more beneficial at that stage of an account's lifespan compared to if you're just starting out, because even with this light cone most likely being the best in slot for Aventurine, as is the case with basically every limited character and their signature light cone, preservation units do have quite a few free-to-play options for their light cones that they can choose to equip over, say, this signature light cone here, even though it does give a hefty defensive stat boost, as well as basically a free defensive gear piece just off the bat with no conditions attached. But the rest of the light cone's effect is he gets 40% defense just straight up. And then when he provides a shield to the ally, the wearer's crit damage increases by 40%, lasting for 2 turns. So this is essentially for Aventurine and maybe Fire Trailblazer, because Fire Trailblazer does have quite a few offensive stats and traces built into their kit. They do have their own like crit damage traces and fire boost traces, but Fire Trailblazer is not really somebody you should, go all in at this stage. Certainly not pull a light cone for them. Absolutely not. So other characters that would be making use of this, like March 7th, Japard, they're just not offensive enough to make use of this crit damage. So this is Aventurine, and this is basically for Aventurine and Aventurine only. And then when the wearer's follow-up attack hits enemy target, there's a 100% base chance to increase the damage taken by the attacked enemy target by 10%, lasting for 2 turns. So 100% base chance means you are subject to the enemy's effect resistance. So you do need to get your effect resistance up past the enemy effect resistance to get that 100% chance. Otherwise, that goes down. So this is a conditional stat. Aventurine, he's going to get free 40 defense, free 40 crit damage. That's going to be very good for him. And this one is all going to be reliant on your effect hit rate, which may not be something you really want to build on Aventurine, because this is literally the only thing that would require effect hit rate in his kit. But much like how Acheron's banner had an option for her outside of her signature light cone, Aventurine looks like he's going to get a similar treatment with this new light cone here, Concert for 2. It looks like it's going to be a decent free-to-play-ish option, so you are going to have to roll on the light cone banner to get a chance to get this light cone, but it's probably something to consider snagging a copy or two. So it does give him 16% more defense, and then for every character on the field that has a shield, the wearer will get 4% increased damage dealt. So for Aventurine, he's going to also get 16% damage dealt increase with this light cone. So this is looking to be a pretty solid free-to-play option. But then we also had the new light cone at the start of 2.0. That also looks like it's going to synergize fairly well with Aventurine's kit. It's going to increase his effect resistance by 12%. And then for every 100 defense, it'll increase his damage dealt by 0.8% up to 32%. And I believe at S5, this goes up to 40%. So that's going to synergize well, because you're going to be stacking defense on Aventurine. He has a lot of damage built into his kit. So this most likely will be his best free-to-play option. So he does have that. And then, of course, if you want to run him with Acheron, there is the option of the Universal Market light cone that gives a fire debuff when he gets attacked. There's also stuff like Landau's Choice to make him draw in more damage, because every time he gets attacked, he ups his counters. So already Aventurine's going to have a lot more options for light cones compared to, say, like Acheron. So unless you're dead set on getting his signature light cone for him because you like him as a unit and you want him to be at his, max potential, whatever your reason, then that would be the reason to go for his preservation light cone. But if you're not really looking for that min-max strategy, going without his signature light cone and just, picking up the light cone, the other light cone on his banner, Concert for 2, or the free light cone from the MOC shop, I think that's going to be a very solid option for Aventurine as well. So to wrap it up, I do think Aventurine is going to be a worthwhile pull for anybody who does not have a limited sustain on their account, anybody who only has one limited sustain and is looking for a second limited sustainer, or anybody who is interested in the follow-up gameplay. If you fall into any of those three categories, Aventurine looks to be a solid addition to your account. If you already have two limited sustainers, if you're not interested in follow-up attackers, then I think Aventurine is free to skip, just due to the fact that our current limited sustainers are still all very strong and very capable of performing their job. But also, if you are looking for a character that has a very long-term viability to them, Aventurine is also a solid pick for that as well, because this does mean that every follow-up attacker that releases in the future is automatically going to have synergy with Aventurine, because he does favor follow-up attackers. In a sense, he is very much like Kafka, where every dot unit that gets released in the future, Kafka is going to stay on top because she can't detonate those dots. I think Aventurine is going to stay on top for quite a while, because every follow-up attacker that releases after him is going to easily slot into his team. And then with his ability to stack his own shields to provide beefier and meatier shields, he's going to provide a lot of security for your team for a very long time. So let me know down below if you plan on pulling Aventurine and his light cone, or are you pulling only Aventurine and skipping the light cone, or are you going to skip Aventurine altogether and wait for a character further down the line? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.